Hey, we're back with the vlogs. Thanks to my godmother letting me use this space for the next couple weeks for vlogging, but also just for like getting away and having some peace and quiet. So it's not a permanent solution, but it's helpful right now. It is a little bit different to what I'm used to. We've got this comfy chair that does this recline thing and doesn't quite come up like my computer chair. So yeah, I'll try and concentrate and stay on topic and whatever, but yeah, no, so I thought I'd start off with a life update, especially also we've got Scribe Chronicler. So in that short where I asked what should I vlog about, Scribe Chronicler asked what I've been up to, what I've accomplished versus what I haven't, and what I hope to do in the near term. I think I'm gonna skip that last one because I got another question about like goals, and so I'll put it all together in that. But yeah, the other ones. So, I mean, the last vlog I made was on the 17th of April, and I did cover some stuff, especially like, you know, not being able to use my art space and my music space, and nothing has really changed there. Also, in terms of what I've been up to, I've made a few shorts lately, so I do have some notes to try and remember, especially because I don't have my computer here to help. But yeah, so I've made some shorts about things that have been going on. So, you know, like I'm going to kind of elaborate, but I'll try and stick to the things that maybe I didn't mention on that. But yeah, the shorts to look at, I guess I'll put some links somewhere, maybe in the description. There's the couple about Centrelink, which is kind of a big deal. Also my psychiatrist, my psychologist. And there was an interesting side note about Japanese citizenship, but did I put that on the thing to talk about later? No. Well, anyway, you can look at that stuff. I think it covers the basics anyway. Yeah, shorts has been an interesting experience, and I don't know, it's a bit of pressure though. Like, it's kind of good to just ramble vlog, where I don't have to, like, I feel like the shorts, I get it, they're polished a bit more, but it does feel a bit unnatural because I kind of have to rehearse things to make sure I fit it under a minute and then try and remember what I was going to say, and it's a bit more like, I don't know, and I worry a bit that my vlog style might get a little affected by that, but I'm sure we're already on the ramble, we're already off the script. I didn't mean to talk about that so much. Yeah, it's nice to just do whatever. Okay, so after that vlog on the 17th of April, yeah, Centrelink, all the Centrelink stuff kicked up. And so as I mentioned in the first short, it's because they didn't process my medical certificate on time. So I put one in on April 3rd, and more than 2 weeks later, they still hadn't processed it, and they are supposed to process things within 2 weeks. And lately, they just suck at that. So, of course, because they didn't do it, I think all the automated systems kick in and just assume that I'm fine now, which I'm not. And so they hooked me up with the job agencies with the mistaken idea that what I need help with is finding a job. I don't need help finding a job. I need help with the medical, psychological stuff. You know, I have a job. My boss wants me to come back. I just haven't been able to do it. You know, and I'm finding it, my functioning, to be really unpredictable lately. So like, what, today's Thursday, isn't it? Yes, Monday and Tuesday, I seem to be doing okay. I had to leave the house on both days, but I managed it, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm doing better than I think. But then yesterday, I was just completely useless. I had to go back to bed for a significant portion of the day. Yeah, and I was really not doing well. And because I don't know when a day like that is coming, it's really hard to commit to a work shift because I don't want to have to, you know, I don't want to say to my boss, and this has already happened, I don't want to say to my boss, yes, I'm coming, and then wake up in the morning and be like, oh shit, no, I'm not. I want to know that I'm going to be able to go to work. I don't like saying, you know, I don't want to promise something that I don't know that I can keep the promise. Yeah, and lately it's just been so hard. You know, even just doing day-to-day stuff like getting up and having breakfast, all those things are hard enough. So Centrelink, my problem is not finding a job. My problem is mental health, medical, psychological stuff, functioning better. Yeah, and so, you know, I know on YouTube it probably looks like I'm doing better than I am, but that's because I record on days where I'm functioning better. Oh, what do you think? Anyway, so yeah, they didn't process my medical certificate. So the first I heard of that was a job agency telling me to come in to an appointment the next day at 9 in the morning, despite me telling them, I don't function well in the mornings. don't put anything on in the mornings for me. If you have to put something on, put it in the afternoon, whether it's a phone call or an appointment, put it in the afternoon. They always ignore it. I don't know how many times I've had to put complaints in about that, how many times I've had to tell them, put it on my file. It just never, the message never gets through. So I was annoyed about that too. But yeah, the fact that my medical certificate hadn't been processed, and so now I've got these people chasing me again. It was pretty upsetting and anxiety provoking. And so then I had to call Centrelink. But if you call the normal job services, like it's job seeker is what it's called, even though I'm not actually seeking a job, I'm trying to recover enough to go back to my job. It's still called job seeker. So I called the job seeker hotline, but of course, like, you can never get through. Maybe in 2016, if you called, you used to have to wait for like 40 minutes and then maybe you'd get through, or maybe the line would just drop out and you'd have to try again, which is a terrible system. But you actually felt like, maybe if I wait long enough, I'll get through. Now what happens is you talk to a robot, you go through a gazillion steps, and then the robot hangs up on you and doesn't give you any other way to resolve your issue. Like, what are your options? You could go in person, but I'm often not functioning well enough to go all the way. Like, there isn't one near me. I have to go all the way in and find somewhere and then wait in the waiting room and get more and more anxious about things, and then talk to someone who doesn't know how to do their job anyway. So I'm not going to go in person. And they keep saying, oh, you can do all this stuff online. And I'm like, I know. I'm someone who likes doing stuff online. If I could have fixed it online, I would have. It's just, so the thing just says, oh, we're all busy now, try calling some other time, hangs up on you. And I'm like, it's no good. Let me look at my notes and not yet. So what I did next is I called the complaints line, the only line they answer. Now, if you're going to call the complaints line, you have to frame it as a complaint. If it's just like you need help doing something, that's not what it's for. You have to frame it as a complaint. And so my complaint was, you didn't process my medical certificate. I actually wrote down this huge thing while I was waiting 30 minutes on hold. I wrote down my complaint, because I had plenty of time to do it while I was waiting, and because I knew once I got on the phone with the guy, I would really struggle to express myself and like what I actually need and what the problem is. So yeah, you haven't processed my medical certificate within the time frame expected. You don't treat mental illness well, and you can't get through the phone lines. Like, I put all this stuff in as a complaint. Now, of course, if they were going to take it seriously and resolve it seriously, they would consider the stuff that I've said about mental health. But the only thing they really addressed was, okay, we'll process the medical certificate now and they'll consider that resolved. But he had to put me on hold again to do that. I'm not sure if it's just because it takes time or if it's because he had to ask someone how to do it. But yeah, eventually it got done. I remembered to get a receipt for the call. But the other thing he said is it has to go to quality control first before it's officially processed, which made me nervous. I'm like, okay, so does the job agency know this? Because if they think that you're supposed to see them, they can get a bit aggressive and threaten to cut you off payments and all that. And for me, it's not a huge deal because I'm living with my parents. So I'm not going to get kicked out onto the streets or anything. But for other people, it's terrible. And also it's just a horrible thing to be told, regardless of whether it affects me that severely, having someone be threatening like that, it sucks. I've had those bad experiences before. Sorry, this probably wasn't the best choice of jumper for, should I just put it on? I'm just getting a bit cold. Yeah, anyway, so he said, oh, you should probably just, give him a call just in case. So I tried to call the job agency, and of course they didn't pick up their phone either. So after 10 minutes on hold, I don't know how much, I must have spent a total of an hour on hold that day. But yeah, after 10 minutes, I was just like, fuck this. So I found their email, sent them an email. And this is an agency I've not had any contact with before. So I had to look it all up and just hope that I got everything right. Yeah, and then I did get an email back, but it was from the main office saying, oh, we've sent it to the right people and we've noted down that you don't want to be called. And I'm like, okay, hopefully they've sent it to the right people. I never got an email from the Sydney office or whoever I was supposed to see. And so I just sort of sat there I hope things are fine, but the next day they didn't call me about missing an appointment. So then I was like, okay, I'm great. But instead, the next morning I was called by a completely different job agency, again, ignoring the whole don't call me in the morning thing. So they woke me up. I had been sleeping okay, and then they woke me up. And it's like, when I'm sleeping in the morning, that's actually quite a big deal for me. So having something unnecessary wake me up, it just sucks, because then I'm not functioning again anymore. Like, if I could get that extra sleep, maybe I would function for the day, but no. But they were calling me. So different job agency to the one that I was first supposed to see. They're saying, they were telling me not to come to an appointment that I didn't even know I had, because they weren't eligible to take my case. And I think it's because probably the first job agency was a disability employment services agency, whereas this was an ordinary one. And even though I'm not on disability, I'm in the disability employment thing. It's very confusing. And until I see the disability employment guys, the other job guys are sort of on standby for some reason, but they don't have a disability arm. So they're like saying, we can't take you because we're not qualified. And it's like, so why did Centrelink dump me with them anyway? So she's like, I'm going to process you out. Like, if you get any reminders, just ignore them. And I'm like, I was going to anyway. I've got a medical certificate. And she's like, oh, okay. And then I think a few days after that, I got a text message from a third job agency just sort of welcoming me to their group. But I suspect they're also a regular job agency, not a disability one. So they're also not the kinds of ones who would be able to take my case. And it's just like, why? If Centrelink had processed my medical certificate on time, we could have avoided all of this. We could have avoided me sitting on hold for ages, feeling stressed and, you know, just having a terrible time. That would have saved them a complaint, and it would have saved me contact with 3 job agencies. It doesn't make sense. And it was just such a frustrating event. It happens like almost every 3 months. It's very rare that they don't fuck things up. And so it finally got me really seriously thinking about applying for the disability support pension, which is different to the disability employment service. So yeah, like, and I know there were some people who wrote to me saying you should really apply for this, and I've been putting it off because it has been hard to get my head around, because, you know, my brother's disabled. That's probably why I have all the trauma that made me like this, but his disability is so obvious and so profound, and then we're wanting to put me in the same category. It's kind of jarring. It's been hard for me to deal with, but after Centrelink has screwed me around so many times, and I really am struggling with life and with work, and it's getting worse as I get older, it seems, it's sort of like, I kind of just have to do it. If I do it, then I won't have to get a medical certificate every 3 months, and this circus won't happen again. Any circus that happens will hopefully be less common, and they'll just leave me alone, and I'll still be allowed to work, but I'll be able to manage it myself instead of having them tell me what I'm supposed to be doing. So yeah, I seriously started looking at it, but that's when I had to spend 1 or 2 days looking at all the requirements, and it's just kind of overwhelming because, like, they have their website and there's so many different sections to the website, and it's like, okay, but what's the most important thing for me to focus on? So I spent some time taking down, you know, just notes about the requirements and like where I might fit. I found a website called DSP Help, and they had a little robot chatbot thing that generated a kit for me to take to my, you know, medical professionals, psychologists, whatever, to give them an idea of how they can write a letter to help me apply for this thing. And that is probably the most helpful thing I found. It even comes with a letter template. And so, yeah, it, like, you know, looking at that, I could almost like, I could write one myself looking at that, because it really laid things out quite well. So I imagine you know, the people I've been seeing should be able to do it with that if they look at it. But it still also says you've got to look at the DSP, the impairment tables, which recently changed. So in the past with mental health, to get on DSP, or to get on anything, and to get on DSP, regardless of your condition, it was like you had to be fully diagnosed, fully treated, fully stabilized, which there's still question marks for me over like whether dissociation is an issue, and you know, treatment, like what is fully treated? There's always more stuff I could try because there's always more drugs coming out, but is it worth doing? Not really, because I keep having the same impacts. And fully stabilized, what the hell does that mean either? They've now changed it to like diagnosed, reasonably treated, and stabilized. Not fully stabilized, just stabilized. And I think that just means your condition is reasonably stable, you know, like you're not gonna suddenly recover. And then they've also changed, so on the mental health impairment tables themselves, instead of saying you need most of the things within a point criteria, it's complicated. Sorry if you don't know what I'm talking about. They have like different ratings of how impaired you are, and within that they've got descriptors, and previously it said you needed most. Now it says you need at least 4 out of the 6 criteria to count within one of those tables, and you need to have 20 points or 30 points to qualify as sufficiently impaired. And so I looked that up, the new one up, and it's very much the same as the old one, but it just, I put it out of my mind for a bit. But looking at it, you know, they do say on these things that often the patient won't know how impaired they are, won't have that full awareness of how much their condition impacts them. But looking at it, I'm like, oh my God, actually, I probably do fit this. And, you know, it's also like the whole schizoid thing of one of the reasons schizoids don't come forward for treatment is because we don't see our problems as problems. Like, they're not really problems to us. Me keeping to myself and staying home, I don't see that as a problem. That's just how I prefer to do things. But then I look at this table and it's like, yeah, if you're living with your parents and you can't live on your own, that's actually in the most severe category for one of them. So that's like 30 points. Most of the things, though, for me is more like 20 points. I forget what they are. Some of them are like, you know, you only socialize if something is organized for you, or you only go to like familiar places, or you rarely go anywhere else. Yeah, stuff like that. And it's sort of like, yeah, that's kind of me. I don't travel very far. If I travel far, it's very reluctantly and very rarely. And yeah, you know, going out places, you know, I'm going somewhere on Saturday and with a friend, and she's studying to be a psychologist, and you know, she's done a really good job of setting that up in a way that I'm unlikely to chicken out of. So, you know, like that kind of thing to coax me out of the house, and, you know, make a go at being social. That is kind of what my life is like. Like, for me to do that on my own, it's just like, why bother? Like, for example, we're going to go to a shoe shop, and like, I kind of, with the whole goth thing, I'm like, yeah, I probably do want to get some different goth shoes some point, but you know, I don't actually need them, so I wouldn't even bother going, except my friend's like, we're gonna find this kind of food, we're gonna go and see this kind of music, and we'll go to that shoe shop as well. And it's like, oh yeah, okay. Since we're doing everything else, I'll go to the shoe shop. But if she didn't say all that, I wouldn't bother, like that kind of thing. Anyway, so like looking at the impairment tables is just like, I mean, in some ways it's kind of upsetting, because then, like, you know, from my emotional perspective, I'm like, no, that's fine, like, this is just how I am. But from the sort of perspective I take, where I can sort of look from outside myself and observe myself from more of an external perspective, it's actually kind of sad. I don't know how to describe the split in the different ways that I can perceive my situation, but yeah, it's kind of upsetting just to see like how badly my life's been impacted and how fucked up I am. But on the other hand, it's kind of also validating, because yeah, it turns out I really do have a problem, especially by society's way of thinking. And so like, I shouldn't feel guilty or like I don't fit in the same criteria as my brother, who has been on DSP from the moment he turned the right age. Like, it's sort of, yes, it's reassuring, like, yes, you actually can be in the same thing, you have been that badly impacted. Yeah, it's a lot harder to talk about this stuff with doctors and psychologists, though, I gotta say. Yeah, anyway, so then, you know, I printed out my own notes, the DSP help kit that it generated for me, the impairment tables for the mental health section, And also, like, I found like a government checklist, official government checklist, and I took that to my psychiatrist, who happened to be my next appointment, and I didn't get the feeling that he even knows really what to do. Like, I got a feeling of like it's too hard, even though I got all the information together, and it was really hard for me to concentrate and like find all this stuff. I put in so much effort, and then he's sort of like, oh, well, you know, it's a bit different to physical illnesses where it's so obvious. Like, you know, psychiatrists find it hard to write the whole thing. Which is, yeah, it just made me feel a bit like, oh God, I don't know if he knows how to write the thing. Like, he thought, he was just like, oh, what form do I have to sign? And I'm like, no, it's not a form. So I don't think he's done one before even, or he didn't give me the impression that he had. Just made me feel like I don't know that I can rely on him. I mean, my GP was like, yeah, you should ask him for a DSP letter. But he doesn't seem to know what it is. So that's the first problem with a psychiatrist. But the biggest problem for me is that he's kind of doubting the things that I say. So, you know, from the start, he's doubted my schizoid diagnosis. And I think that's because he's looking at stereotypes rather than the actual DSM criteria. So that's annoying. He's also asked me, like, what about autism? What about ADHD? And I'm just like, I don't fit any of those things. Like, you know, just because I'm a little bit odd doesn't mean I have one of those things. Then there's a specific criteria, for fuck's sake, man. And then the other thing that he also doubted is he was trying to convince me that my problem with medication was efficacy, not side effects, and claimed that my previous psychiatrist said that. I'm like, no, it was side effects that was the problem. And so he's flipping through his notes like he doesn't believe me. And I just felt kind of gaslit, because if it was an efficacy problem, I would have stayed on the medication for the full 6 weeks or so that you're supposed to try each medication. That is not what happened. I'd have a bad reaction within, you know, some of them within a few days, some of them because we weaned on it would take 1 or 2 weeks for the full side effects to hit me. But that's why I stopped, and I couldn't even last a month. You know, it was only a couple weeks that I could stay on these medications and try and wean on, and it just never worked out. Like, I remember that. I also remember one time I took Cymbalta, and, you know, it happened to be a couple days later, I saw my GP, and I went into my GP and I was trembling, and she's like, what's this about? And I'm like, oh, I think it's just the new medication. It'll stop in a bit. And she's like, no, I'm calling your psychiatrist. And then later she said, you need to stop taking that straight away. And I think I might have been a little bit out of it as well. Yeah, like, I've had that kind of experience with things like that were so bad that I was told to stop taking things straight away. And this new psychiatrist is trying to tell me it was efficacy. Fuck no, there were some things that actually seemed to start helping my mood but would ruin me in some other way, and it was so bad that it just wasn't worth staying on things. Yeah, so I just didn't appreciate that he's trying to make me doubt my own experiences. Apart from that, yeah, so we did talk about more medication. He wanted to try vortioxetine, but I have actually tried that. My dad's GP apparently has been saying, oh, I should suggest this to her as well. And I'm like, guys, I've taken it before. It didn't go well. My God, like, I know it's a newer drug, but it wasn't completely new when I took it. And then the other one he suggested to me was bupropion. I don't know, Wellbutrin or Zyban, few different names for it. It seems to be the pet drug of some of the schizoids who've seen my past videos. Now, the thing about that, right, first of all, it's not actually approved as an antidepressant in Australia. It's only approved for short-term use in helping with cigarette addiction, getting yourself off cigarettes. So that means if he prescribed it to me off-label, you know, as a private script, it would cost more. It's not on the PBS. I would not get the discount. It would not be covered by the government. The other thing is, he's trying to prescribe this to me based on efficacy, not on side effects. And when I look at the chemical structure of bupropion, like how it's processed by the body, and the side effect profile, the well-known side effects it has, it looks exactly the same as any other drug. I know it works differently. It's not a serotonin drug. It's more dopamine and whatever. But everything else about it suggests to me that I will still get the same side effects. And you know, like the change in what chemicals it gets to you in your brain, that to me is more of an efficacy thing, not a side effect thing. And, you know, I pointed some of this stuff out to him and said, I told him, look, if you really think that it's going to help instead of giving me side effects, like, I'll try it. But anytime I get side effects, it means I have to spend the next 2 weeks recovering from it and getting it out of my system, and it stops me from trying the other ways to stabilize my mood, and it's quite disruptive. So, you know, cost benefit, is it really worth it? And so he didn't push it on me. He's like, okay, we won't do that right now. But yeah, so there's just nothing about that drug that suggests I'll react differently, and it's just not worth it, I feel, at this time. And then the other thing we talked about was TMS, which is, you know, the brain magnets thing. And, you know, I think that's something I should try one day because it doesn't really have side effects, but I have some concerns because, you know, like, the whole point I'm vlogging in this space is because my home situation is so stressful, and TMS, like, it seems to have long-term effects for some people, but for a lot of people it's temporary. And I feel like because of the situation I'm still living in, if I did TMS now and went back home into my regular situation, then even if it did help me, it wouldn't last long because I'm just still stressed by, like, the situation I'm in. It doesn't change my situation just because I had a few magnets on my brain. So I'm concerned about that. Like, it's probably not a good timing for that. Another thing is with the commitment, like, I looked up what it is, and it's 3 to 5 days a week you have to come in for a half-hour treatment, and you have to do that for a total of 30 treatments. So that's what, you know, 6 to 10 weeks, depending on how often you go. And I'm having trouble getting out of the house like once a week for these appointments that I've got. You know, I take my dog for a walk every day, but that's not really going out, like, it's out of the house, but it's just sort of around my local neighborhood. To actually, like, go somewhere once a week is hard enough. I tried twice a week today, I tried Monday and Tuesday. I was out. Tuesday was just to the GP, but Monday I went with my cousin to Newtown, and it was quite a big outing. That's two days, and then the next day I was completely screwed. You know, like, to try and keep that up 3 to 5 days a week, and to keep that up for 2 months, are you kidding? I'm not in a good enough place to be able to do that, to be able to commit to that. Like, you know, I don't want to sign up to something and then find I can't physically get myself there to actually do the treatment. It's just, like, it's too stressful. And, you know, I don't want to waste the opportunity, because the last issue is, in terms of Medicare funding, Medicare will fund an initial treatment of up to 35 sessions, I think, and a single retreatment of maybe 15 sessions or so. But this only happens once in your lifetime. So if you screw it up, and if you need more later, you're on your own, and it gets very expensive after that. And I can't afford to be, like, you know, what if I do end up being one of those people who needs it every 6 months? I can't afford that in my life. And, you know, for questionable benefit, I don't know. So I don't want to do TMS just yet. What I think I need to do is get myself into a better situation, more stable, and you know, where I can, you know, I've improved just enough that I can go out more days in the week as well, and then go and do it. And then hopefully, like, maybe it won't completely fix me, but it might do enough that then I can make further improvements to my life and get back on my feet, so that I have less chance of deteriorating to the point that I need more retreatments, if that makes sense. Like, I think now is not the optimal time for me to use that restricted funding of TMS. I want to wait until I'm in a better situation to make the most of it, because otherwise it costs a lot. So that's why I don't want to do TMS right now. Yeah. And so, you know, it just made me really uncertain about the psychiatrist, and I don't know how long I will keep seeing him if he doesn't take me more seriously. Like, I know I look younger than I am, but I'm actually kind of old. I'm not a TikTok kid who thinks they got Tourette's just because they hiccuped funny and saw something on their phone. I've put serious thought into that, like with schizoid in particular. You know, a few years back, everyone thought I was autistic, and autism is in fashion at the moment. So it would have been very easy for me to go around calling myself autistic, but I didn't, because I looked at the criteria and all that, and I'm like, this does not fit me. I've been very careful about that kind of stuff. And also, like, you know, with the DID, dissociative identity disorder, that at least one psychologist thinks I might have, I've been very careful with that as well. And I know that is one of the conditions that the TikTok generation love faking. I've been very careful to be like, no, I don't think that's quite right. You know, I can see some things where they might suspect something like that, but I think it's, you know, it's a bit much to say that without seeing me more and, you know, exploring my issues more. I've been very careful about this stuff. So for him to dismiss schizoid and my side effect issues, I just feel like, fuck you. I'm not, I know what I'm doing. I'm not an idiot. I know a lot of people will try and misdiagnose themselves. But, you know, I've got other medical professionals who can back me up, and I'm not making this shit up. It's very well thought out. So I may stop seeing him, but I only see him once a month for like half an hour, so it's kind of hard to... I've only seen him 3 times, I think, and so, yeah. And I still do have one more question. Nervous Neuron has been helping me work out like what meds I've reacted to, and, you know, I did the blood test with my genetic results, and so she's been sort of taking me through that a little bit. And it did bring up some questions for me about certain classes of drugs that I kind of want to ask the psychiatrist. But if after that he doesn't have anything for me useful and also isn't being supportive with schizoid and the DSP, I may stop seeing him. Obviously for the disability application, it would be better to have him on my side. But, you know, you can also do it with a GP and a registered psychologist. And I'm seeing a clinical psychologist, which is one step up. So I don't necessarily need him for that. Yeah, but, yeah, I don't know. If I'm not really getting anything from him, maybe I just stop seeing him, and maybe it's not worth it. Anyway, we'll see what happens, because if he comes on board, then maybe we can figure out why I have such bad side effect reactions. But, yeah, otherwise, I've got a lot of doubts about him. Yeah, I think there was another another thought that just floated off. But oh well, if it's gone, it's gone. I can always put text in the bottom if I think of it again when I'm looking at this at home. Anyway, so yeah, because he was so annoying about the schizoid personality disorder, I did make a bunch of notes. So for my Patreon cult members, I have copied that into Patreon for you to download. But basically the notes cover where I fit in the DSM-5 criteria, where I fit in the ICD-10 criteria, theories on why I might present differently to the schizoid stereotype, because the schizoid stereotype is just a stereotype. It's not actually the criteria. The one that people try and get me on is the, oh, you don't have flattened affect. And I'm like, you realize that's 1 out of 7 criteria, and you only need 4 out of 7 to qualify as schizoid. And also that criteria includes emotional coldness and stuff like that. And while I can seem a particular way, I've learned that there are certain things I probably shouldn't say because people see that as incredibly insensitive. And I'm like, okay, maybe I don't want to be stirring that kind of trouble, because that just brings a little bit too much bullshit my way. Anyway, so yeah, people are cherry picking one tiny aspect of schizoid and saying blah, blah, blah. Look, if the schizoid stereotype, part of it probably exists because the only reason schizoids really come to therapy and get diagnosed with anything is like me, if they went in for depression and then it's just later that it's come out that there's another issue. Or if they're so extreme in that schizoid stereotype that someone has dragged them in and been like, you are weird, get this person obsessed, get this person assessed. Like someone has been like, you are so closed in, I need to get you professional help. If you're on the milder end of schizoid,
people probably aren't going to notice that you have an issue because you keep to yourself, you don't cause trouble. It's not like borderline personality disorder where you cause all kinds of drama. Schizoids, you keep to yourself, people don't notice that you have a problem. That's why they're not seeing people like me. Like if I didn't have depression, they probably would never find me because why would I bother coming forward? Yeah, anyway, that's a quick rant about that. I wrote some other notes. Also like why my problem isn't just depression and how my depression differs probably because of schizoid complicating it. And then I wrote some other interesting notes, like, things in the research about how schizoids are often underweight and it might have to do with anhedonia around food, or maybe there's a biological basis. I included that because most of my life I was very underweight. Now I'm on the low end of healthy, and it took me a long time to get there. Okay, so I wrote all those notes. It's a long document. It's 3,333 words. And yes, as it got close to that word count, I was like, oh, I wonder if I can get there. And I did adjust a few things to hit it. Slightly obsessive of me. I'm obsessive, but not compulsive. So I don't have OCD either, which is another thing people have wondered about me. Yeah. And then, what else? Oh, so another thing that's happened, yeah, I did get a little bit annoyed at the TikTok mental health trends. I made a little video about that, the generational differences. My generation, or like when I was growing up, it was like, don't you label me! And I think that's also a schizoid thing, is I don't want to be part of a community, so I don't want the label to like lump me in. But, at some point you kind of can't deny that you fit a category, but these days, kids are like, I want every label. I want to be part of every community that I can find a label that I find vaguely relatable. They're collecting conditions, and it's just like, thanks to them, people like my psychiatrist doubt me because I look young and they think I'm part of the TikTok generation making up shit about myself. And I'm like, no, I came to this label very reluctantly. Yeah, that annoys me a lot. And, it just makes things harder. It makes it harder to get help because people don't believe you. Yeah, anyway, so I made a quick thing about that. And I think it also ties into the way that the younger kids see gender as well. Because we were like, it doesn't matter what gender you are, you can do whatever you want. Now they're kind of more like, if you act a particular way, you must be a different gender. And they're actually reinforcing gender stereotypes, which is very backwards. Like, we were supposed to break free of gender stereotypes, but now they're like, no, we're going to give you a very specific label based on how you present. It's just, yeah, so I made a short about that as well. But yeah, that's the thing about, that's the people who are faking mental illness and glorifying mental illness. They're making it harder for those of us who actually have serious mental health problems to be taken seriously, particularly by people who are critical of that youth culture. Now they think I'm part of it. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot, kids. And yes, I'm old enough to call you kids. I'm probably old enough to be some of them. Actually, yeah, I am old enough to be parents of some of these people. Anyway, yeah, but thankfully my psychologist was a lot more helpful with the whole DSP. I came in with the same documents that I gave to my psychiatrist regarding DSP, everything that I found, and I also gave her a copy of my schizoid personality disorder notes in case she had any concerns, but I don't think she does. Like, we've been through this. I've had 9 sessions with her now. No, 7, because I used 2 for the dissociation specialist like an idiot. 7, and she's also got notes from my previous psychologist who I saw for 20 sessions. So it's quite well established, that it does fit me with these psychologists. But she said she'll look into whether there are any diagnostic instruments that we can do, they go through the criteria or whatever. With autism has a very specific diagnostic process. You have to go through all these assessments. It costs like $1,000 or something, which is one of the reasons I never bothered with it. But yeah, she's going to check if there's anything equivalent for schizoid or for personality disorders. And so if I need to do that, we'll do it. Otherwise, the diagnosis will just make it based on, DSM or ICD. Yeah, so she's actually looking into that. How can we support the evidence for your condition? She is taking it seriously. She also thanked me for finding all these paperworks, which is great, instead of my psychiatrist who seemed to see it as oh shit, what is all this? My psychologist was like, this is actually really helpful, especially because I've given them the most up-to-date criteria because things changed recently. Shit, I'm already at 40 minutes, so yeah, anyway, So I feel better about how she's going to help me. And, like we haven't made a lot of progress in therapy, but I do feel like she's supporting me. And so like maybe over time, eventually we'll make some progress. And like, they talk about the therapeutic relationship helping with personality disorders. And that's very hard for schizoids because we don't really do the relationships thing. But who knows, if I stick to it long enough, maybe, I don't know, it feels more worth it than the psychiatrist. It's just annoying that fucking Albanese cut my funding, so I've only got one more funded session, and then after that I have to pay full price, and I might have to ask my parents for help. But if I can get on DSP, then I get slightly more money, and it will be easier to pay for all this mental health stuff. But yeah, anyway, yeah. So then I think then the next week, I talked to my GP, and so my GP is also supportive. I did tell her my concerns about the psychiatrist, but so my GP is going to write a letter or report to help support the DSP. But because of the way that things work with a GP, and also, like she wants to sit down and have enough time to do it properly, it's going to cost me extra. And I don't know if that's a universal thing or if it's just like the way that she's decided to do it. But, can you imagine if you're someone who doesn't have support net in terms of the family, living with my family so I won't be homeless? Like, can you imagine someone else who doesn't have that backing, that financial security behind them, if they had to go and get all these reports and spend all this money, like, just to get on DSP? Like, you're going on DSP because you can't support yourself. It's a terrible system anyway. And so that's kind of like that's where the DSP journey is up to at the moment. I'm waiting on letters, waiting to see whether the psychiatrist supports me. I think the psychologist will, I think my GP will. And I'm really hoping that I'll be able to get it right the first time and not have to have a fight with Centrelink. But I'm trying to remind myself, DSP, if I don't get on it, it's not the end of the world. I have to remind myself when I start things, even if I have that attitude of it's not at the end of the world, it's fine, it doesn't matter if it's a thing. When I'm doing a task, I can get a little bit overly invested. And so when disappointment happens, I get stressed and it affects me pretty badly. That's one of the reasons that Centrelink every 3 months when they fuck up my medical certificate, that's one of the reasons it affects me so badly, because I get into that, like, I've done all this work and, you hope it'll work and then it doesn't work. And then you get the whole like, ugh, everything is too hard. And yeah, it really brings me down. And so I've just got to keep remembering, look, it's okay. And if I do have to have a fight with them, like my dad will support me. I can go to my local member. There are other options. I can appeal. So try not to stress, but I would rather avoid that. And so that's why I put in so much effort to try and get this right the first time. And that's why I'm bothered that if the psychiatrist disputes the whole schizoid thing, he might actually hurt my case rather than help me. And so I'm sort of like, if he writes me a shit letter, I might just not submit it because I don't need that. But yeah, it would be better if he did support, because the more supportive letters I get, the harder it'll be for Centrelink to say that I can't qualify. Even though they themselves have told me to apply. Like, I've done other assessments with them, but they said, because it's job seeker, this is the minimum the minimum level we can assess you at, you should apply for DSP. They keep telling me to apply for DSP, but despite that, I still have to jump all these hoops, even though they know I have a mental illness and all this stuff is really hard and I can only do it when I'm in a very specific state of mind. Anyway, so that's where that whole journey is up to. Now, while I'm a few more things, while all this has been going on in terms of like what can help me, I did think maybe I should do like a fitness or a health camp, but I looked them up and they're mostly about losing weight. I cannot afford to lose weight. I just need to get fit because I am not getting enough exercise. I walk my dog every day. I do my night stretches and sit-ups every day, but I can feel in my body that I am not able to do a lot because physically I feel like I can't do a lot, and maybe it's because I'm not doing enough exercise, but because I don't experience like the dopamine hit that people get, like, people who get addicted to running, I don't get that. I think it's the schizoid anhedonia that stops me from finding any of that appealing, and I need some kind of more structured thing, and it needs to be, I don't know how, like, I'm thinking, how can I get my fitness back up? And I thought I could do like one of those camps or a retreat, but they all sound shit. The one that sounded the least shit is only for 5 days, and it sounds kind of like a high school camp where you like go and do high ropes and obstacle courses and whatever. And they also have like nurses who are doing like nursing students who are trying to get their placement hours up. They come on camp with you. And so it sounds like a bit of a money-making scheme, and it's only for a week, and apparently they're trying to you can get funded through the NDIS if you call it this and that, and so it just seemed a bit dodgy. And then, yeah, I don't think a week is going to fix my fitness issues. And, you know, the reason I looked that up is because looking at mental hospitals, the private hospitals that I thought about checking into a while back, they take you in for usually about 3 weeks. But when I looked at them, you know, the group therapy is not going to help me, especially as a schizoid. It's not going to help me. And I also know about CBT already. I don't need to be taught that all over again. So the things that I would gain from doing a mental hospital is, you know, I might be able to get my sleep back on track, and then maybe exercise. But it turns out they don't have structured exercise. They just go, hey, here's your 1 hour of gym time, go and do something, which isn't going to help me. So I thought maybe a fitness camp, but no, I haven't found any that suit what my situation is. So I'll keep looking, but not too optimistic on that. Another thing that's happened is like with music. So I keep trying, even though I keep feeling disheartened, I keep trying the music thing. So I responded to someone on Gumtree, and his music, well, I think it's a he. I'm just going to call this person a he because I don't know any better. But yeah, his music's really good and it seems kind of promising, and I started writing some lyrics. But there are gaps in the replies sometimes. The first gap was only a few days, and then he came back and was actually really positive. But this time it's, as of tomorrow, if I don't hear from them by tomorrow, that'll have been a week of no communication, right after they told me, like, you know, to start looking for other members. And that makes me nervous because I've had so many people flake out on me. So yeah, I've sort of stopped writing lyrics and stopped looking for people. I've got a few guitarists who are interested, and I've mentioned that, but still no reply. So I'm like, this could be another one that's just gonna flake on me, so there's no point putting in extra effort until I get more feedback saying, yes, this is going ahead, which is really frustrating because I do think music is something that could help me. Like, I actually sat down and wrote lyrics because I thought something was going to happen. It seemed promising, but the moment it stopped seeming promising, I can't do it anymore. But if we can get a band going, you know, then gives me a reason to practice my music, gives me a reason to get out of the house, gives me a reason to socialize, because I can only socialize if there's a reason. I find it really hard to just hang out. There's just a lot in there. Gives me a reason to get fit because I need to be fit to get on stage. But yeah, I'm a little bit nervous after this sudden lack of communication. Like, I don't know, did I do something wrong? Or did they just lose interest? I know my growl style is not what a lot of them expect, so I don't know. Also, in my Facebook memories, so I often think that the time in 2014 to 2015 is the best period, the most productive and least horrible part of my adult life. But I found my Facebook memories showed me a post from 2015 from this time of year. So before my grandparents died, before I completely burned out from Rainbow Death Ray, my old band, and also the job I was doing at the time. Yeah, and I was on antidepressants at this time, the ones that were causing me to lose all my weight. It turns out I was actually not doing so well, and it made me realize, actually, I've misremembered that period of my life. 2014, I had some more positive posts on Facebook, but I was very forced. I was trying so hard to understand why people like life, and I never really convinced myself. And then to find this post from 2015 saying, no, actually, I was not doing well, it's just like, oh shit, my whole adult life has been a series of this sort of thing. And then a couple of days ago, was it yesterday or the day before, I did a phone survey, and it's just an amusing thing to mention. It was about the climate change policies of my local council, and also, you know, one of the questions was like, am I concerned about climate change in terms of like the future generations? And I was just like, no. And there was like a free answer section. I said, look, I don't care because I'm too depressed to care. I don't care about anything in the future. I don't care about climate change. I'm too depressed. But then, you know, in terms of the policies and stuff. And I said, also, I think renewable energy and green energy is a marketing term. Nuclear is clearly the way to solve it. You look at France versus Germany. France with nuclear, Germany going back to coal because they closed down all their nuclear plants. And I was just saying, if people can't, we haven't even got legal nuclear power in Australia. And until that we do, until it's really part of a conversation, why should I give a crap? We're doing it wrong. We're just doing it, solar panels, like, okay, a bit easier here because we've got a lot of empty space, but toxic components of that and the wasteful amount of space, and you put your wind turbines up with all the concrete, or you put it on the ocean floor and disturb the ocean floor and the sea life, and concrete itself causes a lot of carbon dioxide emissions, and nuclear, smaller footprint. It has a bad reputation because of a few disasters and the way that people do not understand radiation. No one died from nuclear shit from Fukushima, and the only people from Chernobyl were the people directly involved in the crisis. Those were the ones who died. Radiation is not as scary as we've been led to believe. And yeah, I was just like, if it's seriously a climate emergency, I accept the climate science, but the way that we're going about solving it is wrong. And I went on this whole rant about that and just said, look, apart from being too depressed to give a shit about the future generations, we're also solving the problem wrong. And if we're going to keep doing it wrong, and if no one's going to listen to this, to the right way to do stuff or a better solution, not even consider it, why should I give a shit? There's no point. I can't do anything. We're just going to keep putting in these things, and renewables require gas backup, or else really expensive batteries with limited resources. We can't make enough batteries to solve the problem. Yeah, I was just like, fuck it. So that's the thing, is I tell people, yes, I don't care, but then I go on this rant as if I did care, and I don't know, maybe that's something to do with the way that I dissociate my perspectives. Maybe also part of the reason I don't care is because some part of me used to care a lot, and then became so disheartened that now I can't care. Maybe that's just the thing. I just found that kind of amusing, the contrast between me saying I don't care, but here's how I would think if I did care, and that's also why I still don't care. So that's a recap of what's been happening. Long video. And life still sucks, basically. And I'm gonna end this video because it's taking a long time. But yeah, stuff and things.